Welcome back to Hey Kentucky. We are now happy to be joined from the SEC Network, former Vandy quarterback and now an SEC Network announcer, Jordan Rodgers. Jordan, how are you, sir?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry we've had sort of a weird setup, but I appreciate you doing it. You did a Kentucky game earlier this year, a game against New Mexico State, where the Cats played just so-so. They've since improved. How do you judge Kentucky at this point?
Well, I think they're growing. I think they're improving, but you were at that point in Stoops' tenure where it should be happening. And when I met with him before the game against New Mexico State, boy, he looked tired. That was the week he had just taken over the reins as the DC. Looked like he was really trying to institute a new philosophy on defense as far as zone coverage, getting away from some of their man tendencies, which they'd been burnt on early in the season, despite having some talent in Chris Westry and man coverage. They changed their philosophy a little bit, so they're growing. They're learning. Stephen Johnson took over the reins that game, actually, with Parker getting dinged up. I was thoroughly impressed with his ability in the passing game. You look at him, he's obviously got athletic ability, he makes plays, but his ability to take what they teach, which is half field, safety split, progression reads, and execute it far beyond what Parker had been able to do and protect the ball. That really gave me some confidence with how they can project moving forward, but they're growing on both sides of the.
I was surprised at how well he passed during that game. I mean, most people thought of him as a runner. You were not very critical, but you were critical a little bit during that game of the way Kentucky was lining up. You thought they were misaligned a lot. Can you expand a little bit on that for me?
Absolutely. New Mexico State came in up-tempo, as a lot of teams try to do when you're on the road in the SEC. You try to wear guys out. And that was one thing that Stoops even mentioned. Their front seven, they had to learn how to establish depth. They needed to get their second guys up to speed, so they didn't have to rely on Elam taking almost 80 snaps a few weeks prior. You can't sustain that type of play up front when guys get worn out. So yeah, I think there was a little confusion as far as the tempo. I'm not sure if they weren't ready for it, didn't prep for it. Guys weren't lined up. They weren't ready as the ball was getting snapped against New Mexico State. One bright spot on that defense, though, Jordan Jones is a playmaker. He was flying around. I'm sure we'll get to him, but watching him on film was thoroughly impressive, especially after some words he had early in the season about Kentucky and their defense.
I think you just like him because his name's Jordan. That's why I think that's where you got.
Maybe
now,
a little bit.
They're playing your alma mater on Saturday, and the Cats have lost 3 of the last 4 to Vandy. How do you think UK matches up with them? And it was such a disappointing loss last year. You think they'll be able to get the victory?
Absolutely, and Stoops even mentioned how disappointing that loss last year was. And really, if you look back at the tape, a trick play for Vanderbilt and a touchdown, a couple big turnovers before half that really swung momentum. Kentucky didn't allow Vanderbilt to score in the second half, but weren't able to close it out on the offensive side. I think that's what it's going to come down to. Vanderbilt's defense, not very good. Vanderbilt's offense, not very good. Kentucky's defense hasn't been great. I think that's kind of a wash. I think it really comes down to Kentucky's offense against a Vanderbilt defense that isn't quite to the caliber it was last year. How can Stephen Johnson in the passing attack really exploit the secondary? Because I think that's kind of the weakness of Vanderbilt. If I had to point out, I think Zach Cunningham and Oren Burks are a heck of a player. Both of them great players in their own right, so they're going to be tough up front. I think Stephen Johnson's got a chance to exploit them in the secondary. It's going to come down to that. It's going to be a close game. It's going to be a dogfight. Really, at the end of it, when you look at two teams that are pretty even, it comes down to turnover and time of possession. So I look to see, once again, for a few major turnovers to be the turning point in that game.
Let me ask you a big picture question. Mark Stoops at Kentucky, do you think that it's going to work for him here? And let me just ask you, in terms of the Kentucky job, I know you're familiar with it because of your time at Vanderbilt. Is it an attractive job now with the new facilities? I mean, how do you think the job of head coach at Kentucky stacks up?
Well, first and foremost, I think this is a make or break, could be a make or break game for both coaches, Derek Mason and Mark Stoops alike. I think this is going to be the winner of this still has a chance to go to a bowl game. And I think for Stoops, his 4th year in, with what they have done in the facilities, and I was there, the facilities are amazing. I mean, you got eye scanners to get through doors, you got thumbprint. I mean, the facilities are unreal. And what that speaks to, everybody in the fan base, the administration, is ready to win. If Stoops can't put together a season, which I think anything short of a bowl game this season is going to be something of a disappointment, that's going to be tough to swallow for the fan base. But as far as an attractive job, it's really not. Not from a standpoint of the facilities aren't up to date. They're amazing. But anytime you're in Kentucky, it's about recruiting. And facilities are going to do one thing, but the further you get away from Florida, the further away you get from Louisiana and Georgia, the harder it's going to be to recruit. And facilities only go so far. You have to improve on the field. And schools like Kentucky and Vanderbilt, Missouri, those type of schools have to put a product that matches up with the facility. Right now, it's not quite.
Jordan Rodgers, not only do I always envy your hair, I also envy your knowledge. And let me tell folks, amazingly nice to stick through what he had to do to make this happen today. Thank you very much, sir.
No problem. Thanks for having me.